bottom of exactly why far-right terrorism is on the rise. And I can't help but feel as though, wrongly, obviously, but the answer is staring us in the face. And I want to kind of get in amongst that a bit, really. It emerges that MI5 is, of course, working round the clock, and thankfully, very thankfully for us, we don't hear about the vast majority of the ones and the attacks that they thwart from both Islamists and the far right. But joining me now is social policy analyst Rakib Ehsan, and I believe, yes, there we go, Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Rakib, can I just ask you a little bit about... I'm very keen to make sure I get the tone of this right, because for not 1 second am I trying to excuse, I would never dream of it, the rise of far-right terrorism. But when you look at maybe the way that the government is not getting to grips with things like national security, whether it's in the Channel, whether or not people feel as though, the country is changing around them, whether seeing these migrant hotels popping up left, right and centre, I can't help but feel as though that is playing into the hands of people who... lend themselves towards far-right terrorism. Your views, Rakib?
Well, Patrick, I authored a piece for CAPEX very recently where I advanced the view that what we're seeing in Britain, they're perfect conditions for the rise of extreme right-wing activity. What we're seeing is the country contending with a border security crisis, relatively high levels of illegal immigration, and that does pose a security problem, especially when you hear migrants being housed in under-supervised, unregulated forms of accommodation and then absconding. That is a serious security issue. And then when you're looking at the amount of money which is being spent on this particular crisis, especially the housing illegal migrants in the middle of a cost of living crisis, I would make the point that the combination of economic and cultural anxieties may well be fueling a rise in extreme right-wing activity in Britain.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It is that potent combination, that kind of Molotov cocktail of disaster, really, which is that. Major General Chip Chapman, I'll bring you in now. I am seriously concerned that we are sitting on a powder keg as a country. We've got huge numbers, you're popular, we've got huge numbers of people in the radical Islamist sect, and an increasing number of the far right. And, I mean, let's be honest, at some point that appears as though it's going to come together, and that's not going to be great, is it, Major General?
Well, if you look at how we look at these things, we look at what you've said previously, Patrick, in three ways. So firstly, we look at what we call cultural nationalists on the right-wing extremist side. The second one is white supremacists or white nationalists. And the third one is identitarians, those who see that we're leading to an inevitable race war. So that's the way that right-wing extremism is looked at by the security community. Whether that is all true, I think that we have to be careful of the dread hazard and threat inflation, because the high point of terrorism is kind of over. There aren't that many people who are arrested each year. Most people who are arrested for terrorism do less than 4 years. So we have to be slightly careful how we look at the figures. And some people like me, for example, would tell you that we have to use evidence-based analysis when we're looking at these things. And of course, there is going to be a contest refresh in the next year. That is the counter-terrorist strategy. The part which is missing, which you've alluded to, the counter-terror strategy includes prevent, prepare, protect and pursue. It's the promotion of community cohesion, which is possibly been missing, the fifth missing P, and has been from 20 years. There have been some very, very good reports, but very little done in terms of the recommendations and seeing action.
Yeah, absolutely. Rakib, I'll throw it back over to you. Rakib Ehsan, I can't help but feel this is, as we've been alluding to here now, just a really potent combination of all these different factors that potentially are about to come together in some kind of perfect storm. We've had huge societal changes in the UK, huge demographic changes. Integration has not necessarily worked too well in a lot of cases. We've then seen, a slowdown of our economy. We're also seeing, importation of people across the Channel and extreme views. The internet exacerbates all of this. But one issue I'm keen to get you on now is actually, are we too soft on terrorists in general? We see the likes of Anjem Chowdhury could not be more overt in their terrorist desires, back out and about on the streets of Britain. We're not exactly clamping down on them too hard, are we?
Well, be careful when we're talking about potentially authoritarian responses. I remember that in the Tory leadership contest that Liz Truss won, that Rishi Sunak suggested that those who express forms of hatred against Britain could be referred to Prevent. There could be all kinds of flexible interpretations involved in that. And I think that one of the key points that I would like to make is that we have to protect our own liberal democratic values, and they can't be sacrificed in anti-terrorism efforts. I think my fellow guest makes a fantastic point. My background being in social integration, I think that community cohesion component is missing from our broader counter-extremism strategies. There's some people who've said that while our counter-terrorism efforts are fairly robust and effective, when it comes to counter-extremism, there's a great deal of work that needs to be done. Patrick, you've talked many times before about the existence of parallel communities, social segregation, and how that impacts on levels of social trust between different groups. And the reality is, if you have different ethnic and religious groups living side by side but not having that positive interaction, then that's a gift for extremist actors to capitalise on those suspicions of the unknown.